Good afternoon again. I think for the sake of time, we should get started. I would like to first of all thank you our presenters, Patrick McGrath and Willie Ferguson to join. Just a brief introduction about Patrick. Patrick is an experienced and passionate educator and is responsible for evangelizing the impact that technology can deliver to teaching and learning across primary, secondary, and third level education, and has a particular interest in inclusion and equity for all. We are also joined by Mr. Willie Ferguson, who is the Senior Specialist Student Accessibility Services at Zayed University. Willie trained as a secondary teacher in Ireland and then became interested in learning difficulties. He worked in the government school system in Ireland, followed by jobs in education workshops supporting at-risk students. This was followed by teaching positions in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the UAE. Willie also worked as a senior inspector for English and a teacher trainer. Presently, he works with Students of Determination in the Student Accessibility Services Department in Zayed University in UAE. So it's over to Patrick and Willie to take us through the presentation.
Get of me. So I'm Patrick McGrath. I'm head of education strategy and here at Texthelp, and that really stretches across EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, India, and Africa. I've put my contact details on the screen there. You're more than welcome to reach out after today and contact me, or of course our friends at EduTech, for anything you might want to learn more about after today. But really, my job is in and around teaching and learning. How can we take technology tools? How can we turn those into effective, good practice? And how can we make sure that absolutely everything is accessible? And that's really my mission, is to take through that. And I thought it would be useful, just before we start into products, to give you a little bit of an overview just on Texthelp in general, because it may well be a name you haven't come across. And I think it's always useful to put it into perspective. And some numbers might surprise you about Texthelp. So Texthelp, in terms of helping students with accessibility, have over 50 million users worldwide. And I see the video should just be in. So now you can see me in real life. Now you can see me waving my hands around on screen. So that's really good. And hopefully the guys can enable that for Willie later on today as well. So back to the slide. So 50 million users, 50 million students being helped on a daily basis with our tools. We are actually older than a lot of edtech companies, 25 years old. So we've been doing this for quite some time. And that means that our solutions really are very well proven in the market. And they're proven because we listen to educators. We listen to students with individual needs, with individual challenges, those students of determination that we want to work with. And we make sure that our tools work for them. In the UK, as an example, 68% of all higher education students in the UK qualify and receive our Read and Write solution, our literacy support toolbar, with 400 staff, and we also have a Queen's Award for Enterprise we were awarded this year. And what you may not know about Texthelp is there's many other accessible technology tools that we now own and fall under the Texthelp banner, and this may actually be news to you, Willie, as well on the call. But people like Claro and Lexible and Lingit and WizKids, those all come under Texthelp Group. So hopefully we're well respected out there in terms of our mission for accessibility. But what is that actual mission? And this really feeds well into the webinar today. Our mission is a very simple one. We want to help everyone understand and be understood. Everyone. So anybody we come across, whether in the world of work, in higher ed, in school at secondary or in primary level, we want to give them the tools that when they're learning online can help them understand and be understood. And if you think about higher ed for a second, we work with thousands of higher education institutions across the globe. And these are just a few that I picked from the UK in particular here. So just within the UK, all of the major universities, over 60% of the universities in the UK use our tools for accessibility. And of course, across the region, amazing institutions like Zayed as well use our tools, American University Beirut. So many universities across the world use those. Now, when we talk about products and we try and put it into perspective, what are these products that we talk about? And sometimes it's really useful to have a summary of what those products are. And the simplest way to think about what we're talking about here today is our products are easy to deploy add-ons, right? They're add-ons, they plug into where students already learn. So if students learn in Microsoft Word, or they learn on a web page, or they learn through a PDF textbook, or they learn through your learning management system, we provide the add-ons that help make those be more accessible. So we support accessibility in there, and we support learning. And we do that across the curriculum. And you'll see today, whether you have a student who struggles with literacy, whether you have a student with visual impairment, whether you have a student who needs some additional help and support and accessibility for maths content or for science or engineering subjects, we make sure our tools work across all of those areas. And it's important to us that we do this every single place that learning's happening. So what are these products? So there's 4 that we're going to touch on today, and we're going to very briefly go through them just for the pressures of time. And I really want to get to the demo piece that I'm going to show you. And the first one is we're going to look at PDFs. How might we support PDFs? And this is probably something that Willie and the team at Zayed haven't seen, and hopefully I'm going to share some new stuff with them today. Also digital maths. How can we make maths more accessible? ReachStack is our tool to provide accessibility toolbars and functions on websites. And Read&Write, of course, in purple there, is our most used tool globally, and that's specifically for reading, writing, comprehension, and study. And that can be on web pages or on Office 365 or on Google Docs. And as we think about accessibility today, please remember that if you need, for example, closed captions today, those are all available in our webinar. They're available with the CC button directly within your Zoom window screen there, because we try at all times to make sure that everything we do is accessible. So you can switch on closed captions. You'll also have access to a transcript and a recording today to make today's session as accessible as possible. So those are the 4 things we're going to talk about, and I'll dig into those in some detail. Before we get to the products though, there's really just 3 very quick things to mention. Number 1, of course, we know over the last 18, 20 months, remote learning, digital learning has absolutely risen. We've had periods of lockdown. We've had periods where we can't, of course, come into our universities and our schools across the globe. So we know that that has risen. We know that the model has changed, that there is an increased focus on digital learning and learning online. And we also know that that's very likely to stay. In some schools, for example, that online learning has risen by 70+%. In some schools, it has been a factor of 10 times the number of devices that are now in schools. And if you think about higher education, think about the number of students that you're working with that are now working off campus. They are working remotely. And what is the likelihood of them returning directly to university, or perhaps pursuing a more hybrid environment? And I'm going to pick that thread up really when we talk to Willie later on today. But there's one very important thing that we have learned that we want to touch upon today. And that is the reality that when students are learning online, that your student body starts to look much like this circle on screen. Every single student has different needs. So whether when we talk to Willie, there's students with very specific needs there, for example, in Zayed and other universities that we work with, or whether it's simply the body of students recognizing that they need additional supports, or perhaps simply learn better with additional supports. The one thing that's come out of these extended periods of remote learning and hybrid learning going forward is that every student is different. Every student is unique and has unique needs. So it's important when we talk about these technology tools that we recognize that any technology tool that we put in place, whether it's from Texthelp or from others, is supporting every one of your students and can be stretched and used by those students of determination, those students with particular needs, but can equally be used by other students who perhaps have no visible needs or challenges as well. So that's an important thing to recognize, and we'll come back to that after the quick demo we have. So let's very quickly go through some slides just to take you through a very quick overview of the products and where they help. And then we'll jump right into the demo, because I think that's always the most important piece. And the first one, of course, is Read&Write. So we talked about that slightly earlier. Think about what I said. It's an add-on. So it's effectively a toolbar. That toolbar is going to sit where students learn and give them access to all of the literacy support they need. So features like text read aloud, features like dictation, like a screen mask tool to help with distractions. We've got a web tool that will help remove distractions from web pages and make it easier to read. We've also got research tools built into these as well. And we're going to look at all of those. And we put those all in this one toolbar. And that word toolbar is going to be important as we go through the session for the rest of the afternoon, because a toolbar to us provides students with all of the support tools in line. So a lot of our tools pack all these buttons into a toolbar, just make them available when a student needs it. Take Read and Write, 26 different things that they can draw from to help support their unique needs. And these are built around universal design for learning principles. And that just means that we make sure that when we give them this toolbar, we give them multiple ways to access the content, to access the learning, to articulate learning and express it in whatever way suits them. We give them multiple ways to do that. And that's very important. Go back to our big circle, all of the dots in our circle, all of those different students. We want to make sure they've all got access to that. And if we think about very specific needs, what do we actually help them with? Well, of course, with something like Read and Write, we're helping with general accessibility, text to be easier read, to be easier comprehended. But if you think about specific supports, dyslexia is an obvious one there we can help with. Dysgraphia, dyspraxia, ADHD, pupils on the autistic spectrum, in exams to have computer reading available. Mobility and dexterity, hearing impairment, visual stress, visual impairment. So any of those areas Read and Write can help with. So that's Read and Write, and we'll have a close look at it in the little demo in a second. The next one is Orbit Note. So what we do with Orbit Note is we have yet another toolbar, so toolbar number 2, and that toolbar gives us the tools we need to make our PDFs accessible. So think about PDFs. PDF textbooks your students might be buying, PDF worksheets, research papers or materials, a thesis piece that they're reading for a reference or a dissertation. Those need to be made accessible. And Orbit Note makes sure that students have the tools that can make sure those can be read aloud, that can make sure they have aids for comprehension within there. It also gives them an advanced set of note-taking tools. So if they're reading a large PDF, we give them an accessible way to add a note to that. And we'll see that in action as we go. The next toolbar is EquatIO. So digital maths. So if you think about a student, for example, with visual impairment, the lengths that a student services support unit has to go to make sure that maths is accessible there is extraordinary. What's even more extraordinary in that is that a pupil or a student who's studying maths with, say, a visual impairment, who perhaps simply needs to listen to the maths to understand it better, is having to learn not only maths and not only the tools, but is having to learn things like LaTeX code as well and be able to transcribe that. So that adds to the challenge of comprehension. And with EquatIO, we give all of those students just 8 different tools. On that toolbar, 8 different tools sits at the bottom of the screen. So pupils and students can type maths, they can listen to it read aloud, they can use shapes for manipulatives to take abstract content and make it their own. They can use that to photograph paper-based work and turn it digital to make it neater and smarter and more accurate and ultimately more accessible. We give them a digital calculator that they can use there, which is accessible as well. And if we think about that, and we think about all of those things that we can do, including things like accessible graphs. We even have Braille output on our graphs. We have audio trace on our graphing so students can listen to what the graphs actually represent on screen. We end up helping a lot of students in this. So students with dyslexia can commonly struggle in particular maths areas because there's similar traits there: dyscalculia, dysgraphia, the ability to get that maths down on paper, visual impairment we've talked about, and of course, let's not forget regulation, the need in the market to make sure that everything we do is made accessible. EquatIO can help with that. And the last toolbar that I'm just going to mention in passing, and we're going to look at that really briefly, is ReachStack. And that toolbar is something that you would install on your university website. And that means that you give accessible technology, AT, assistive technology, to every single visitor to your website. So if your website happens to be in English and they're a native Arabic speaker, we can give them translation tools, or the other way around, of course, as well. We can give them the ability to have your web page read aloud. They don't have to install anything, it's just there. And that raises the level of your website's accessibility for all visitors. So we want to give them access to assistive technology tools on your website to help drive traffic, and most importantly, to help those students and those parents, of course, who might ultimately need it. And when we think about those toolbars, Remember what we said when we're going through the demo here. I'm going to be just showing you these in Chrome just because it's a little bit easier when I'm on a Zoom call to share it. But remember that these work on any devices. So in your university, if you're using Apple Macs or you're using Windows devices or Chromebooks or you're using iPads, the tools will work on all of those places. Everywhere learning happens, so in Office 365, in Google Docs, on a web page, in a PDF, just on an image, on a YouTube video, even on paper, these tools will work on every place. So if you've got an LMS in your university, those LMSs will be supported from an accessibility perspective by just adding these simple toolbars on. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to jump into hands-on, and we'll just keep a close eye on the time, and I'd ask my good colleagues at EduTech just to make sure I'm on track time-wise. I think we're okay for about another 10 minutes before we jump to Willie here. So I'm going to jump into the first thing that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to go to a web page. So this is a simple web page. I might be using it for background reading. I might be using it to take some study notes, whatever it happens to be. Let's say I'm studying psychology for the purposes of today. And what you'll see here is that this read and write toolbar that we talked about first, sitting docked at the top of my screen. I can open this when I need it, and I can place it anywhere around the screen to get me the help I need. So it's not going to necessarily clutter everything. Easy things that this can do, okay? I've got text to speech through Hover. So if I need this web page read aloud to help me from an accessibility perspective, I can click Hover Speak. I can go all the way down to the paragraph that I want read aloud. And as I hover over this, that's going to be read aloud as I go. So if I have that, oh, that's not going to work for me today. What happens sometimes when we do Zoom demos and we have things set up in advance, Zoom throws off the extensions. So we'll just open up the toolbar and we'll get this working for you. So if I go to a hover speech and I go down to the bottom here, you're going to have this read aloud. Okay, so now I have that read aloud, so that helps me understand that, but also I have dual highlighting, so it's going to walk through each of the words as it's read aloud. Now this can be read aloud in English, this can be read aloud in Arabic, this can be read aloud in French and Spanish and German, 67 different languages. So whatever the web content I have, if I set the language up, for example, with Arabic, it's going to read right to left for me, and it's going to paste through the words in exactly the same way in a natural sounding Arabic voice. In English, it's going to do left to right, and again, exactly the same. We can even have regional differences in terms of accents. So I have the ability to read that aloud. The other thing that I have here is I can select all of these words on the page, and I can turn that into an audiobook just by pressing this audio maker button. And what does that do? That takes all of the words, turns it into an audiobook. So this web page now is an audiobook, and you'll see down the bottom of my page, that's now an MP3 file. So I can put that onto my mobile phone or my tablet device, plug my headphones in, and listen to this content. And I could have selected all of the words on a page, and it's going to turn it right into an audiobook in the voice that I need, in the language that I need, in the speed that I want it read aloud in as well. So that gives me the ability to take a web page and turn it into something that's supremely more accessible because I can listen to it. And other things that I have here, for example, if I come across a word when I get to this, okay, and this word, perhaps I really don't know the meaning of the word. So there's the word environment. Maybe I can't pronounce it. Well, in that case, I can get that played aloud by just hitting play. Okay, so I can get that played aloud. And if I go to the word, what I can also get right here is I can get a dictionary definition of this word as well. So this dictionary definition, I can read what this word is, or I can have it played aloud. So I can have that played out, supremely accessible. But what if I need a picture reference for this word as well, just to build some understanding? I'll get a picture reference to that, and that's a widget symbol. So those are standardized symbols as well. And throughout the Middle East, those of course are culturally relevant and appropriate as well. So I get to help understanding. What about distractions on the page? So distractions on the page, we can apply a screen mask on the page. So we can focus on particular areas on this page. So we can narrow down the reading range and reduce the distractions. And if we, for example, needed something like a screen overlay on this, we could jump into the screen overlay and we can apply that directly, and we can apply that across all screens. So screen glare, pupils with ADHD, pupils on the autistic spectrum, pupils with dyslexia, this very simple tool can really help, and I can just turn that off really easily. Other things that I can do here, which can be useful when we're trying to understand a web page, is perhaps we have this web page and we need to make some notes from it. So we're going through the web page. What can we do? Well, we can go through here and we can say, well, this line is supremely important. So what I'm going to do is mark that out as a line that's important. I know this line is important to me as well. Maybe that's on a different topic, so we can put it in a different color. And I'll take this one, and this is back to yellow. I've got 4 colors of digital highlighters, just like real highlighters. And what I can do with this, when I go through an entire web page, I can go through my entire web page, and I can highlight every single piece of note that I feel is important to this particular piece I'm reading about as I go. I can categorize them in colors. And what I can do here is just collect these highlights. This is really, really useful for a block of reading material for pupils, our students, because this will take all of those highlights, it'll pull them out of the web page, it'll put them into a notes section here. So I have revision and study notes here ready to go. I have the ability to have a reference back to my original starting point as well. And if you're using Microsoft Word, it's going to produce it in a Word document. And if you use Google Docs, it's going to produce that in a Google document as well. So I've got the ability now to have those highlights, and those highlights will stay directly on screen as I need them. And I can do this anywhere. So if it's a Word document I get, I can do exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to clear these highlights directly off the screen. So what happens from an accessibility point of view if I look at this web page? This web page, so you've seen I can get it read aloud. I can get it turned into an audiobook. I can create some study and revision notes. I can screen mask it to reduce screen glare. I could have dictation on this if I happen to put an answer in. But if you look at this web page, this is a very relevant web page here right now to my study, but there's a lot of adverts for clothes on this. Obviously, I've been shopping for some clothes somewhere, but you'll see that there's a lot of distractions on this web page. And this is probably a web page with very few distractions compared to many. So we've got a tool here that can help us simplify this. And we can simply press simplify page. And this is really going to help us with accessibility in any web page. Press the simplify page button. It takes all of the content, it simplifies it, and it makes it more readable. So from an accessibility perspective, we can now decide that we want to change this into, say, a different font size. So if we've got dyslexia, we can have this in a dyslexic font. We can also change the contrast on this as well to help us read it better. We can change the spacing on this word as well to suit us particularly to help our reading. And of course, on the font, we can change the font size. So on any web page, we can make it far more readable. But what we can also do, if I just make it smaller again, so as you can see this, I also have the ability to simplify the text. So I can simplify the text by pressing this minus button, and it's going to simplify the levels of the text on the screen to make it even more readable. And of course, I can then change the font size. I can also still get access to all the great tools in Read and Write. So if I want this read aloud as well, I can go back to my hover button and I can have this read aloud.
Key concepts of behavioral psychology.
So I can have access to all the tools. If I want to use this as a way to make my study notes, I can do that. So that's Read and Write, and that's going to take us through a web page and give us the capability to access that in a very accessible way. So we then talked about Orbit Note. We said, right, well, what can we do on a PDF? So on a PDF, we can do exactly the same things here. So for example, we can go through this very long PDF and we can say, well, actually, I don't know what is this word and how might I pronounce it? So I can pronounce this word and I can press play, right? So I can do that, but I could also say, well, what is this thing that I'm being shown on screen? And we can see here that this is a piece of Greek mythology. So I can get an understanding of where that falls. I can also still do the same digital highlight tools that I had before. So in my very long PDF, I can do highlighting on this. And if I do highlighting on it, I can also then press this collect highlight buttons that you saw earlier. And I can go through a very long PDF and I can turn out my study notes or my revision notes or my notes that I need to make an essay. So this gives me the capability to do digital highlighting. And of course, what I can also do is I can just clear those all the way off. I'll go to my highlighting and I'll clear these and I'll get these back again. So I have access to the study tools I need, but what happens when I want to make notes? Well, if I go here, okay, and I say, I actually want to make a comment about this particular section. So I have comments now in PDFs. And what I could do is do something really cool here, which is I can add voice comment notes. So I can simply start to record my voice right here, right now. I can record up to 60 seconds and that will record a voice note directly in line with the comments that I've made. I press stop and I add my comment And now what you'll see is underneath this comment is the ability to play this back. So I can have that voice note played back directly on my screen. I can also simply add comments here, and I can use a prediction tool. So I can start to type, and this will help me build my sentences. So this will help me understand the words that I'm actually writing here directly on screen. But what I could also do is, if I turn off this facility here, I can turn on dictation, and this means that I can simply type using my voice and speaking directly into my microphone to make as many notes about my PDF as I might potentially need. And those notes are then added in, so I can dictate. So I now have the ability to add multiple layers of notes by my voice or simply recording my voice. So in terms of accessibility, I've got everything that I actually need here. And I can do the same within things like my pushpin tool. So right here, I can use the pushpin and the dictation tool to make some additional notes that I can refer back to at any point in time for my revision and review. And you'll see there that I spoke into that in a natural sounding voice. It's dictated those notes in. And what that means is if I go away from this document and I come back at the end or when I'm prepping for an exam, I can go right the way here and I can go, what is this red pushpin? I can click it. I can see the text that I dictated, and I can also press play.
I can use the pushpin in the dictation
and I can have it read aloud. So I now have the ability to create accessible notes everywhere. And of course, don't forget, in terms of accessibility, I've also got notes here. These are my notes. So I can actually type, but this is text typing now. And if I need to make this more accessible, I can do that. So my notes, I can type directly onto a document instead of behind it. And what I can also do here is I've got the ability to do freehand drawing. So I can annotate directly on top of a PDF. So when it comes to study, I've got the ability to do all of this within this Orbit Note toolbar. So beyond that, and I think beyond PDFs at this stage, and I go, right, well, what happens when we've got a PDF and there's mathematical content? Well, that's where EquatIO comes in, the third and final part of our toolbar here. So EquatIO will give me the ability to have maths accessible. So if I have this engineering booklet and I actually need this maths read aloud, I can actually go to my screenshot reader. So I've just opened this at the bottom of my screen and I can go all the way to the screenshot reader. I can draw over some mathematical content and I can let go. And this mathematical content now can be read aloud.
T equals 1.1698 over 50 pi equals 7.4.
So I can now have maths be accessible to me as well. So maths can be read aloud. So any PDF tool, this can also be read aloud from a video. It can also be read aloud from a Word document or from an image file. Anywhere that maths occurs, I can now give my students access to create and listen to maths read aloud. And if I go one step further on that and I go in to say something like this, so here's a problem sheet for some higher level maths. So I need some help and support for my individual need. I'm going to pick up my screenshot reader and I'm going to draw over this question because I need it read aloud. A typical screen reader won't read this aloud and won't make it accessible, but EquatIO will. And if I press play on this,
if y equals ln of open paren 1 plus x squared close paren comma find dy divided by dx.
So that'll read that out loud. Now, what's really useful here is that EquatIO will also let me complete this question. So if I need to go here and I need to go through this question, what's this question? So I actually need to come up with my answer. So I need to go D over and I need to do dx. So I can start to type here on the bottom of my screen and use prediction to help me. But you'll see here that as I type the word over, it's going to give me the right symbol. I don't have to figure out how to do maths on top of this. And if I were to type, say, PL for plus, plus starts to come up in 2x, and I need squared, so I can start to type SQ for squared. And now all of a sudden, I've got accessible maths that I can drop directly into my document on screen. So sorry, that's a bit of a leftover from the last demonstration there. So I've got the ability to do that. And also what I could do is I can pop in graphs directly in here that can be listened to. So these have Braille output and these have audio output as well. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to a new screen and I'm going to show you the last and final toolbar here. And I'm going to go to just our web page. So this is just the Texthelp web page. And I'm going to show you the very last toolbar. Many universities around the world use this toolbar, and that's our ReadStack toolbar. So I go to ReadStack, and I now have this toolbar. This is inbuilt into our website and is available to be inbuilt into any university website. And this will give me the ability to have text read aloud. So I can click anywhere on my page, and suddenly my web page is accessible to all of those students and users and visitors who don't have accessibility tools. Things like the dictionary, the picture dictionary, the audiobook generation, all of those things that you've seen are now available. So that concludes our hands-on. There were a number of tools there that we went through. So think about how those might help all of your students. The ability to give them study, research, and accessibility tools on PDF with OrbitNote. For any math subject, we've got EquatIO. That toolbar will help with accessibility, will help with read aloud, will help with entry for those people who need it. ReadStack can go right on your website, and Read and Write, of course, the ultimate literacy toolbar support tool. And I want to just mention one last thing before we get to Willie here, and that's this. We talked at the very outset about the fact that all of your students are different. Each student has an individual approach to learning, has an individual set of needs. What's important when we come to technology tools is that we pick tools that are useful for every single one of your students. It's just like this flight of steps that you see directly in front of you right now. This flight of stairs is actually designed and built in Canada. And it's really lovely set of steps to look at. It's going up to a city hall in Vancouver. But actually, if you think about it, there are many ways that you could approach those stairs. If you just want to run up the steps, you could do that, right? But perhaps you have a physical challenge, you might have limited mobility, or perhaps in a wheelchair, then we can climb using those ramps. But if you're the businessman or woman who happens to be out there and needs to visit the city hall and has some large cases to bring with you, you might want to use the ramps too. Like me, if you're out on a family walk on the weekend, walking up the ramps may be a much nicer way to climb those stairs. The point is that if you design learning right and you give students the widest range of technology support tools, they have those multiple ways to approach learning, just like these steps, designed with inclusivity at mind from the outset. Given the tools that they need, students can explore learning and articulate learning in a range of different ways. And that's really important. So as I move through, it is my absolute great pleasure. I'm hoping Willie's still with us. Willie has probably heard me talk way too much by this time in his life, Willie, so I apologize. I'm sure you had a quick nap there while I was talking. Willie's probably that. I've heard it all before, Paddy. But Willie, a huge welcome. We haven't talked in a wee while, so a huge welcome to you today. It's wonderful of you to join us. How's things in Zayed today?
Everything is great here. Thank you very much. Very busy coming up to the end of term. Lots of exams to prepare for. And of course, students having nervous breakdowns over end of term assignments. So very busy. And of course, we're calling you from the City of Expo 2020, which is a very exciting thing. And those techies among you would love it. It's absolutely incredible. Lots of interactive displays there that are mind-boggling in some cases.
You know, I've been watching, Willie, when you say that, I've been watching with envy. In the UK here, they're running a lot of TV adverts promoting the city and promoting the events that are happening there. And as you well know, I love the region and like to get out as much as I can. Obviously, in the last 2 years, that's been a non-starter, but very much would like to be part of that. So hopefully you're getting to take part of that. So Willie, I've got a few questions for you today, and just maybe to give us all a bit of background on this call. Can you tell us a little more about student services at Zayed? Like, how many students do you typically support within the unit that you work with, and how many staff actually are devoted to doing that?
Well, first of all, we have two-prong approach towards the students in the university for giving them support. We have in the general university, we have a maths cafe, and we have the English support writing system as well. So that's for the general population. What we in student accessibility services offer is support for students who have either a physical disability, maybe blind, low vision, hearing loss, mobility issues, and also students with learning difficulties, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc. So In our area, we have close to 300 students now out of a university population of 10,000 registered with to receive our services. And it's kind of increased a lot in the last year. We've gone up by something like 20%. So all the time our services are increasing. However, we're noticing that a lot more students have learning difficulties rather than physical disability. And our physical disability numbers are fairly constant. And the other thing we're noticing more and more, students are coming to us with multiple disabilities, which is something that we're catching quite quickly now, whereas before it took us a little time to follow that. Basically, someone might have very mild form of dyslexia, which of itself wouldn't create an issue, but then they'd have a mild form of dyspraxia, mild form of dyscalculia, and by the time you get the whole picture of their learning ability, you can see that this is an impediment to them getting good grades and a high CGPA. And I'm afraid the modern world is focused on a high CGPA at this stage. So it's very important that we give them support. And that's what our function is here in the Student Accessibility Services. What we do is each student who joins us, who registers with us, we give them a specialist who works closely with them and provides general workshops on whatever they need, okay? But we also try and give them academic support as well. So we have a two-pronged approach towards helping these students.
And Willie, just picking up on something you said there, you said that you've noticed more and more students coming with, you know, multiple challenges and sort of a rise in certain areas. Is that being highlighted by the periods of remote learning, or why do you think that is? Like, is it just more apparent, or are students more willing to put themselves forward and talk about things? Like, what do you put that down to?
Actually, I just think it's something that has always been there, but we haven't. We've been focused on people with severe conditions, and we've been dealing with them. And slowly, we're getting a reputation inside the university as people who can improve CGPA. Forget I have dyslexia and I want to be able to read properly. It's all I want a job when I leave university. Is helping people focus on what they need. We're discovering, a lot of our students we're discovering in maybe year 2, these generally are very highly functioning, highly intelligent young people who have managed to get through school and the early part of the university without being diagnosed with any disability. So what's happening now is they're saying, hold on a second, I'm working twice as hard as my friend, and my grades are not as good. Why? So we offer a screening service, and then if we're not sure about the results, we go on and we do a formal assessment for learning difficulties. If they have a physical disability, and this may shock you, but there are people in universities all around the world who have physical disabilities and don't know they have a physical disability. And I'm referring to, in particular, students with hearing problems. About just before COVID, we had a screen test for students in one of our campuses. And what we discovered was out of 40 students who were tested for hearing, 10 had mild to severe hearing problems, enough to necessitate them going either to an audiologist in 2 cases and getting hearing aids, going to the ENT. We had 6 cases of my youth, it used to be called blue ear, but wax in the ear. And but it was so severe that their hearing was impaired. So this is something that we have to keep in mind as well. It's not just learning difficulties that has been undiagnosed, but also in some cases, a physical disability.
It's interesting, Willie, in some recent sessions that I've been running, one thing that's resonated with a lot of people is I use that iceberg analogy. And I say,
Yes.
look, you know, actually those above the waterline, you know, that above the waterline is what we know about and what we target support for and what we provide technology tools for. But what we're all discovering is exactly the 90% of that iceberg, and all of those other students that are sitting below the waterline that just kind of bob along and aren't noticed as much. But it's wonderful to hear what you're doing to do that. And what role in generally in the unit, what role does technology play in generally in that support for some of those students?
Well, we find technology very important for our students, and particularly here in SAS, we're pushing it. All students in the university have a computer. The majority of students use their phones to access their classes during this period of learning online. So, oh, by the way, that's just a little note to you people who are creating apps. Please priority give to phones because more and more students are using them to access material, etc., etc. So technology is very, very important here. And in SAS in particular, we emphasize it because we notice that by training our students in technology, we are actually getting them up to the same levels as other students in the university. And in some cases now, because of online learning, some of our blind students have told me that it's only at the end of the semester that the other students in the class twig that there's something different about them, that they're shocked.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's incredible because what they're doing now is our blind students are not using paper-based products anymore. The materials are downloaded directly from the internet into their laptops or whatever, and then onto their braille machines, so that they can read it, or they're using voice to text as well to get the information that they require. So actually, I was shocked the other day. My colleague Miriam was printing something, and I don't know if you've heard the braille printers. They're extremely loud. And I went in and I said, "What's this? What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, she said, we just have to print a couple of pages." I hadn't heard it in 3 years.
That's amazing.
And they're very expensive machines.
Yeah.
All of our students now are saying, "No, we don't want paper." Blind students, we want it in digital form.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And you know what's good about that, and what you said about those students, you know, their peers hadn't known that challenge for assistive technology was always there was always a stigma associated with it, because it was those 3 students got it in the particular room. And that's wonderful to hear a real life story. So that's one thing we've been talking about for quite some time. We need to almost remove the word assistive and not make it different. It's just technology. I talk about me using glasses, Willie. That's assistive technology, and nobody refers to it. In fact, I could just see the 3 of us on screen all using assistive technology in our glasses. So Willie, you and I were fortunate to meet. I don't even know how long ago now. I said 3 years, but it might even be 4 now. But and you've been using Read&Write and EquatIO ever since. How does that generally help your students?
Well, actually, I use it myself, believe it or not. Some documents arrive to me in Arabic, so I translate it using the translator, and it's very accurate. I was in a meeting this morning and caused a lot of confusion. Because we received an email yesterday in Arabic, and I was talking about the email, and it was early in the morning, and the person running the meeting looked at the other person and said, "Did you talk to him about this beforehand? How does he know what's going on?" And I said, "I have Read&Write. I don't need people to translate for me." So it's very helpful in that way, and I'm always using voice to text because our text to voice, because you know, to read long articles, sometimes I give support to students, and you know, we have to go through materials, and it's much easier to go through it with that assistive technology, and they are very appreciative. All the students here, as I said, we have about 300 registered with us now. get workshops on Texthelp, on Read and Write in particular. And also we're now providing, yesterday we ran a workshop for faculty at the university promoting it, because as you said, we do see it as our mission to spread the idea of UDL throughout the university.
Yeah.
And we're by using Read and Write and EquatIO, I feel that we are helping not only faculty but this general population of students increase their grades by giving them as much assistance as possible.
Yeah. And and I think, Willie, that's not mentioned enough, and I am actually glad you raised it. And it was not, we hadn't planned this in terms of the answers and stuff you're going to give, obviously, but to note that academic success ultimately is why the institution is there in the first place. But like what we're actually doing is not just providing accessibility through these tools. We are providing a path to academic success, and I think that UDL piece is important. And I know we could talk about UDL all day long, but it is, because that gives them multiple paths to academic success, and that's really key.
And as you said, not all students are made the same. I'm talking about the general population of students as well. I mean, they're not made the same. They learn differently. And some of them know the best way they like to learn, but others don't. So it's a learning process for them as well. The problem, I find one of the peculiar things is when you're dealing with students who are actually quite intelligent, and there are a lot of them about, that they have compensated so much for different things, and that a little bit of the assistive technology or technology that we are using helps them enormously. And they're not expending so much energy on things they don't need to expend energy on. They're just getting to where they want to be, and it's a great thing for them.
Yeah, and one of the struggles sometimes when I hear, and I know, look, there's people like you and me, Willie, and then there's obviously the sales team will be talking to universities around the world as well. But one of the kickbacks always around technology tools is, well, if you take a school, they'll go, well, I only have 50 students who have dyslexia, therefore I only need to use this particular piece of software with 50 students. And sometimes it's a struggle to articulate and explain to schools and universities that actually the benefit is in giving it access to everybody. And it's not just a sales pitch. It's not to get more money, because the price is the same irrespective, but it's that you need to give them beyond, you need to give all students access beyond that. Now, Willie, here's a loaded question coming up. And this is a loaded question because I'm sitting here looking you eye to eye. But obviously we've been working with each other for a while. What's it been like to work to Texthelp? Have we been useful to you? Do we help you out where we can? I don't want to answer your questions for you, but just saying.
Okay. Yeah. No, excuse me. We got a new member of staff recently, and it literally took one email to get a workshop for her, and then an update for the rest of the staff here on Read and Write. So I mean that's excellent, and we always know we can count on you to help us. I mean, fortunately, we have a very techie staff. They have to be, because as I say, we promote applications wherever we can, and not only Texthelp, but so a lot of them have taken off with your products and have promoted it among their students. I know that all the students I have been dealing with have downloaded it and are using it for in the ways, maybe text to help, things like, or text to speech, all of that kind of thing, translation, because it's a better quality product than other things. But yes, Texthelp, I found you very useful over the years. As you know, we've had very individual issues here, which you have been very good in helping us solve.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? It's lovely to hear that, but it's even nicer to hear that students were just able to download the software and run with it because it was intuitive to use. And I think that there's always a concern, particularly when you're looking at the scale of higher education and potentially the sheer volume of students you're dealing with. It's like, right now, do we have to run workshops for every single student? Do we need to do one-on-one sessions? And yes, there are students will need that, but for me, the best thing about what you said there was students were finding it
Well, we've
intuitive
got
to
an
use.
organization here called PALS at the university, and they have Tech PALS, and they are well versed in your products as well. So when a student has an issue downloading something or using something, we can recommend them to.
Well, I hope it's not
contact
very
them.
long before I'm out there to see our friends at EduTech, and also I'm hoping that we can do some PDF workshops with your students going forward, because I think that would be something that would be
That would be
new
interesting.
and
Yeah.
interesting and different. And I'm going to just finish. I've got a couple of last questions, because I know we did touch on UDL there, and you guys have been big champions for that. But is the UDL application and picking your tools around UDL, is that just to widen access and as much as possible throughout the student body? Is that why you do UDL as an institution?
Well, it isn't really institution-wise yet. I mean, we promote it. It is our credo here at Student Accessibility Services, because basically we want less work. It makes our life much easier if students have access to multiple forms of accessing their material. For example, at the moment, what we have is we're introducing Ally here, Blackboard Ally, because we want our students to be able to access the materials as much as possible without having to come to us. Okay. So, I mean, and that is something that's going to be rolled out to the university come next semester. So we're looking forward to that. We found, there are two benefits of something like Ally and the reports they give. It makes teachers think more about what they're putting up online. A lot of us, I include myself in this, we're constantly designing materials, but we're designing it in ways that we haven't questioned in years. Yeah. So with Blackboard Ally, it's forcing a lot of teachers to reevaluate how they've presented material for accessibility, but also why they've done certain things in documents that they've been using maybe for the last 10, 15 years. So that's a very good help. The other thing I just want to mention, Paddy, is that COVID has, as you know, introduced an awful lot of students to online and technologies that they otherwise wouldn't have used. What I'm noticing is that our students who before COVID were known to us as being technophobes and would describe themselves still today as technophobes are in fact able to use Blackboard, are able to use a Texthelp, are able to use reminding the apps on their phone for reminders, all that, without any issues at all whatsoever. Yeah. And it's amazing how proficient they have become in Zoom, for example. For example, they're recording their lectures, and they're taking the data off the screen, and they're turning them into notes, and then they're highlighting the notes in Texthelp and things like that. So it's surprising to me that these students kind of still maintain that they have problems with technology when they are so proficient in using the technology that they require. And I think also I have noticed less resistance from them. If I can convince them that a piece of technology or an application is useful to them, they're more willing to apply themselves to learning it.
Yeah, it's always, I always get asked, or at least pre-pandemic, what's the one piece of advice you give? And I'd always go, just provide opportunity. And despite all of the terribleness of the last a couple of years and the struggles that we've all had around COVID, one thing it has done is provided opportunity to those students who perhaps may have been resistant or just didn't want to be motivated on that. They have had to be motivated on that, and giving them that extra room, I think, has been good. So, Willie, we've only got got a couple of minutes left, so I'm gonna give you two quick fire pieces here just as we finish off. And thinking about it, and you've probably touched upon it there, but think about the legacy of the periods of remote learning. What must we keep in place as we kind of look towards perhaps more hybrid models? Like, what's your one thing? What should we make sure that we don't let go of from our experiences with remote and online learning?
Actually, believe it or not, one of the big things for us here in SAS is contacting people around the world to see if they have solutions to problems that our students are meeting. We've had huge amount of international cooperation from places you wouldn't believe. We were in, you probably know them, AVA in America provide this application for students who are profoundly deaf. And we're, we've been asking them questions, and of course yourselves questions, about how can we solve certain problems. And this level of cooperation, I think, is very important that we keep it up. We have become a sounding block for other institutions as well, how to solve individual problems for technology for students. And we've been promoting that through our awareness events, etc. So that's one aspect I would like to hold on to. That level of international cooperation is just phenomenal. We were in contact with Harvard University. Phenomenal kind of just sharing of ideas.
Yeah, and of course, an accessible document in Los Angeles is an accessible document in Dubai, is an accessible document in Brisbane. The same rules apply even at the very basic level, and I know you touched upon those earlier. So last question for you today, Willie, and then Sanjay will get wrapped up. I know we're a few minutes behind time here. Willie, I want you to leave our audience and attendees and those people watching our recording after the fact. What's your one piece of advice, only one piece of advice to other institutions in the region specifically around building equity for all students? Is it make content more accessible, give them the tools? Like what's your one piece of advice?
Just remember, students are individuals. Technology helps. And if we can equip them with technology that suits their learning styles and learning abilities, that would be phenomenal. But we also have to remember that I used to say when I was teaching, my job was to give them information to students and to help them learn. Their job was to forget. So
very good.
We have to remember, just because we introduce something in semester one, we have to repeat that again and again and again. Like Texthelp, your applications. Yes, we do it. Read and write in the first semester. The students join us here, but if they're not using it or if they're not talking about it, we will reintroduce it again, and we'll keep an eye out for it. Like every time I give a session to a student, I kind of say, have you downloaded this, that, and the other, and what do you use? Because they forget. It's like your learning toolbox. You remember, or your teaching toolbox. Remember those when you were, at the chalk face? We had a series of tools, and sometimes we used them and we forgot we had them. And 3 years later, we'd say, oh, I must use that again. It's the same with these applications. Maybe the student isn't ready for them. They're not prepared mentally for them in the first time you introduce it, but keep on reintroducing it again over a series of time, because this is something that will help them for life.
Absolutely. Well, Willie, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I see Sanjay on screen here. And Sanjay, this is a warning for future webinars. When you put two Irishmen on a 1 hour session, you're guaranteed it's not going to stick to 60 minutes. So we have run over there, but I hope you'll indulge us, Sanjay, because there was some.
No, it was pretty good. Yep.
Directly there.
Thank you so much for.
just with a quote, and it is my quote, but it'll be very familiar, I guess, to Willie, because the sentiment I think many of us share. But we need to focus on a time where we no longer talk about differences. We need to form new habits. We need to adapt our practice and support the needs of everyone, and we can do that through technology. And the last line there, for me, our differences are our superpowers, and ed tech is and can be our magnifier. And the whole approach is to make sure that we respect that every student is different, and we understand that they need a range of different tools and access. And we, of course, hope that we can work with you at your institution, through our friends at EduTech, and help everyone understand and be understood. Back to that original mission that I set out earlier, it's very important to us. It genuinely is. If you look at the history of our company, that's why we actually get up in the morning. It's not, believe it or not, to make money. People think we're this big commercial organization. We are, of course, we've got wages to pay, but it's genuinely driven by this mission. I'm going to put, Sanjay, my contact details on screen, but I'm going to encourage everybody, of course, to reach out to the team at EduTech. I'm sure Willie might send me a nasty message after this, but I'm sure Willie's door is always open throughout the region if you want to take a reference from Zayed going forward.
And go to our website as well. We have a lot of information there that might help people who are setting up. Please contact me, willie.ferguson. You can share my email address at zu.ac.ae anytime, no problem.
Perfect. So Sanjay, thanks for the opportunity to you and the team there at EduTech. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure you'll pass your contact details on for anybody who does want to reach out. So over to you.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, thank you, Patrick and Willie. It was such a interesting and useful session. Please send in the inquiries to Patrick if you like, or even write to us on the email address which is on the screen. I would just like to take one line from Paddy's one slide, if I may, which said that necessary for some, but useful for all. So that what sums up Texthelp as. While it might be necessary for some, it is definitely useful for everybody. As even Willie was highlighting that he himself uses some of the tools. So it's for everyone to use. So do feel encouraged to write to us, and we'll be happy to set up one-to-one sessions and take the inquiries from there. Thank you very much once again.
Perfect. Thanks all. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye.